Leeds University student Connie Shaw has hit the headlines after she was allegedly suspended from hosting a campus podcast for holding gender-critical views and for interviewing a detransitioner. So, is free speech under major threat in UK universities? I'm joined now by University of Leeds student Connie Shaw.
Hello, Angie. Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I think you deserve a round of applause. Connie, so for the people who are watching who don't know what happened, perhaps you could just begin at the beginning and tell us exactly what went on.
Yeah, so I was elected as the daytime editor and I started that role in September, and I was overseeing coverage on Women's Hour, Politics Hour, LGBT Hour and some other shows. And I also started a podcast of my own at the same time, and I purposely made sure it had nothing to do with LSR because I knew it'd be putting them in a difficult position because I wanted to talk about gender ideology and I'm gender critical. And so one of my first episodes was with Charlie Bentley-Astor, and she's a detransitioner. There was some backlash about that, but nothing was said directly to me. And then I also did an interview with Graham Linehan. Obviously, we all know what, Graham Linehan is, painted as an anti-trans activist. He's just a women's rights activist. And the day after that, he published an article that I wrote for his Substack. And then the following day after that, I got an email telling me that I had been suspended from Leeds Student Radio for putting the health and safety of other students at risk. And
presumably they cited the article you'd written for Graham Linehan's Substack.
No, they didn't cite... Well, yes, they did, actually, sorry. They didn't cite it specifically. I'd written other Substacks before. They just said that the suspension was as a result of my online activity, my Substack and my media productions.
Did they give you any specifics about any of this?
No, and I asked them if they could, so that I could defend myself in the interview, but
of course.
They didn't give me any more information.
This seems to be a common repeated pattern where you've committed a crime but they won't tell you what it is, as in Kafka's The Trial. OK, so what happened next?
So I was invited to an interview, and I went to that interview, and I was told that the investigation was nothing to do with my gender-critical views. But then I was also asked, how do you maintain an inclusive environment at LSR when your choice to publicly publish your views makes some feel unincluded?
So it's not about your views, but it is also about your views?
Yes.
OK.
Because, they can't tell me... I mean, the finding of the investigation, they dropped the allegations of misconduct, but they said I'm guilty because I have brought LSR into disrepute, but they can't tell me what I've done that's done that.
And what was the form of this meeting? Were you summoned, effectively?
Yeah, I had to go to a meeting, and they said that if you don't come to the meeting, the investigation will still continue. And the meeting was just with two people who work at the Student Union.
And, OK, so how did that feel when you were in that situation? Were you baffled? Did you expect this kind of thing?
I mean, to be fair, the whole thing, I was actually surprised it didn't happen sooner.
Right.
But when it did end up happening, I was like, wow, this is actually happening.
Yes.
I mean, the interview itself, I couldn't believe some of the questions that were asked of me. I was asked, how do you support trans rights activists and trans people within LSR considering your own views? I just said the same way I would treat anyone, regardless of whether we disagree or not.
So was there implication there that you must be openly, actively supportive of this particular group? Otherwise you might be violating the inclusivity policy.
Yes, I mean, that's the argument that I guess they would put forward, that why would you want to oversee a programme that you don't agree with? But that would be like the same as I wouldn't have... If I didn't select... it'd be ridiculous if I hadn't selected presenters to go on Politics Hour because I disagreed with their politics.
Right. Now, presumably, the people who are investigating you don't really understand the arguments that you're making, because it doesn't sound to me as though they've really read them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Because they're talking about you being antagonistic towards a particular group, but not the case that you're making for women's rights.
Yes.
Which I think is presumably key to what you're doing.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So what will happen next? Do you have any idea?
Well, the Free Speech Union has appealed on my behalf. We haven't heard anything back yet. I don't know whether they'll overturn it or not.
Right.
We'll see.
But my understanding is that they want to re-educate you.
Yeah, so they've said, even though they know I'm graduating next year, so I wouldn't be running for committee anyway, they said if I did want to run again, I could only do so if I provide a written apology to the wider membership and if I undergo mandatory training. What
would the mandatory training entail?
I'm not sure. They said it would be up to the union to decide what that training is.
OK, but it sounds very medieval. Is it public flogging? I mean, what do they have in mind? Is this a broader problem, do you think? I mean, you're at Leeds University, and you obviously are interacting with students on a daily basis. Do you get the sense that there is a kind of monoculture, that there is a sense in which only certain opinions are allowed?
Yeah, I mean, I sit in seminars, a feminist philosophy module that I'm taking, and I'm the only one who's gender critical. If there are others, they don't express their views. And everyone already knows what I think, so there's no point staying quiet in real life and just spouting online. But yeah, I have very tense seminars and people don't like what I say.
Do you have people that support what you're saying?
Privately, yeah.
That's very interesting, isn't it? So people are willing to say secretly, yes, I agree with you, but they're not willing to stand up.
Yeah.
But why is that? Is there a climate of intimidation? Is it the fear of what might happen to your career prospects?
Yes, I mean, I've had people tell me that they've had friends tell them to be careful of associating themselves with me. I mean, the whole reason why I purchased my free speech membership was because the person who helped me edit the podcast with Charlie got in trouble with a separate society, and they told him that he needed to disassociate himself from me and my work, and if he didn't, there'd be further actions taken. So at that point, I chose to purchase my membership because I thought, well, if that's going to happen to someone who has just helped me edit, what's going to happen to me, who actually recorded the podcast?
Yeah. Now, presumably, you've said that you were, in a way, anticipating some kind of reaction from the student union. You're aware of the climate that exists on campus. So you must feel very passionately about this subject. Perhaps you could just explain to us why it's so important to you.
Well, I actually used to buy into gender ideology when I was at school. I started to question it just as I left sixth form. And then when that seed had been planted, coming to uni when gender ideology is everywhere, everyone's pronouns are everywhere, you can't not sort of see it. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And then I met Susan Smith, who's the director for Women Scotland, and we did an interview with her actually on LSR, and I realised I agreed with everything she was saying. And then over the summer, Tickle versus Giggle happened, which was the case in Australia, where Roxanne Tickle, who's a man who identifies as a woman, was found to legally be a woman, and Sal Grover was found guilty of basically discriminating against him on the basis of his gender identity. And that made me so angry that I decided that I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I have had people suggest that I'm a grifter and that I only do this because I just want a career and that I'm just being anti-woke for the sake of it. But at the end of the day, it has had real consequences on my relationships with people.
I mean, I would say that yours is the majority view, but there are very few.
It's not at university, though.
Not at university. That's interesting. So do you think there is a genuine generational divide here?
Generational and also gender divide. I mean, obviously, we can see the stats in terms of the way that the gap is widening between men and women and the left and right. But I think for girls especially, and I think that's possibly a reason why it's become so shocking for people, is that because I'm female saying these things, especially a young female, most young women are, buy into this gender stuff. So I think that maybe becomes more shocking for people, and also because girls are just, I used to be one of those girls. I was obsessed with the idea of just being kind and progressive and striving towards everyone having equal rights. But I've obviously come to realise that the phrase trans rights are human rights does not mean what they say, that, what rights do other people have that trans people don't have?
It's a very good question. Finally, Connie, are you optimistic that this will all resolve itself, or is this just the start of a longer battle?
I mean, it's another battle. It's a start. My thing is another battle in a very long war, I'd say, and hopefully people like me, and I've had other people message me and say thank you so much for talking about this. So I think we're hopefully at the start of the beginning of the end. So yeah, I'm slightly hopeful.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on to explain what happened to you. Connie Shaw, everyone. So, a Leeds University Union spokesperson has said the following: inclusivity is one of our core values, helping to ensure that everyone can enjoy their university experience free from discrimination. Due to ongoing appeal, we are unable to comment further on this case.